Uruguay's done it, now Canada. The use of cannabis for recreational reasons is now absolutely legal throughout the country. There was jubilation as people rushed to buy the drug when the law came into force at midnight, but concerns remain about its link with mental health problems and how drug-impaired driving will be policed. Weed, pot, dope, Mary Jane, green, call it whatever you want. But in Newfoundland, they call it legal, and many queued into the night to be the first customers, now that Canada has become the largest fully legal marijuana market in the world.
All the years of activism paid off. Cannabis is legal in Canada, and everybody should come to Canada and enjoy our cannabis.
The recent potted history of legalization started in 2013, with Uruguay becoming the first state to free the weed. Across the border in the United States, its recreational use and medicinal use remains illegal at federal level. However, 9 states and the District of Columbia have made recreational use fully legal, with a further 31 states allowing it for medical use. But what will happen when a nation of 37 million people is introduced to a wide variety of marijuana breeds and strengths? Skunkweed, for example, with its high levels of THC, the main psychoactive component, is far stronger than the resin commonly smoked in the 1970s. Some in Canada have concerns. How will drivers be tested to see if they are high? What will employers do with high employees? And some of the medical profession have some long-term concerns about addiction issues and the effect on mental health. The Canadian Medical Association Journal has called the legalization an uncontrolled experiment in which the profits of cannabis producers and tax revenues are squarely pitched against the health of Canada. Joining us now is the National Director of Research and Public Policy at the Canadian Mental Health Association, Firdaus Hosseini. Firdaus Hosseini, broadly speaking, is this a good idea?
It's a great question, John. I think broadly speaking, by legalizing cannabis, the government of Canada is taking a bold step in ending the criminalization of people who use cannabis, lessening the burden on the courts, blunting the impact of organized crime, and improving the health of Canadians by regulating and enhancing the quality and safety of the cannabis products they're consuming. Ultimately, this is a step in the right direction. In Canada, cannabis is one of the most widely used psychoactive drugs. And according to Statistics Canada, 42.5% of Canadians have tried cannabis at some point in their lives, and 16% have partaken in the past 3 months. Well, this tells us that Canadians were using it regardless of legalization or not. Now, without it being criminalized, Canadians are better served to ask for help when necessary instead of doing it in hiding and in fear of criminal charges.
Well, it may be saving money in the law and order administration and the rest, but surely it's going to cost money in mental health services, in new methods of detecting people who are stoned when driving and the rest of it?
Yeah, and that's why one of our recommendations in our policy plan was that all tax revenues should be allocated back to public health initiatives. So that includes into public awareness and education campaigns to make sure that Canadians are educated and they can make informed decisions when it comes to cannabis, and especially into mental health and addiction services. Because what we'll see is that because of the criminalization being not attached to this anymore, people that need help are more likely to seek help. So with that knowledge, we want to make sure that the government's increased funding for mental health services. And currently in Canada, we're at 7.2% of our public health spending on mental health, and we need to increase that to make sure it's commensurate with the burden of illness.
Well, how far do you regard psychosis, psychiatric difficulties, and the rest as being a concomitant of cannabis, or whether, in fact, the majority of people just use cannabis and get away with it?
So yeah, although cannabis is now a legally regulated substance, its use still comes with risk, and we want to make sure that's clear. Like alcohol or tobacco, the use of cannabis engenders potential short and long-term health consequences. And as you mentioned earlier in your segment, it is linked to acute psychosis, psychotic symptoms, and cognitive impairments similar to schizophrenia. But again, there's no causal relationship shown. There's a lot of correlational relationships.
Right. But then,
in our hope.
Let me ask you another quick question to end with, which is the big one, which is, does this cover things like skunk? I mean, I've even tried it in an experiment and really got very badly stoned.
Yeah, and everyone's used to cannabis is different, and one of them is if you take something that might be really high in THC, especially with the new levels of THC in cannabis today, you have to be careful because some people will experience it differently. And you have to find that comfort zone potentially. And if you don't, there might be some forms of
Faris
intense nausea
Hosseini,
and
on that
vomiting.
note, about being careful, we must end it. Thank you very much for joining us. We're back tomorrow evening. Till then, have a great time. That's Channel 4 News.